Hey everyone, so as I'm recording this, we've already done the main recording for episode 1 of Aces of the Round Table. And basically the one thing I just want to let you know before you get into that is that this is a very experimental thing. We had to improvise a bit. So we want you to be taking notes not just on the content of the conversation, but on uh, the way the video is done. So any ideas you have about the way we do it, the way I perform as the host of the panel, um, any stylistic or aesthetic thing, anything in the format that you think would be an improvement. We would like your feedback on this. We'd like to develop this and refine it as it goes forward. Uh, Especially because we really did have to wing it in some ways. We didn't even know if we would have the full panel before uh, until we got to recording, and it ultimately did end up being me, of course, as well as Robin L., Val, and Marble. And she joined the conversation a little bit after we started recording, but she was there for nearly the whole thing. And we shoot for an ideologically diverse panel. Now, we didn't quite have that to the level that I wanted. Most of the conversation was leaning toward inclusion of asexuals in the LGBTQ community. I was the only one who was firmly against it the whole time as far as the conversation that happened. That's just something to know going forward. But see the rest for yourself, and take notes so we can get your feedback. Thank you. All right, everybody, welcome to the first episode of the new Roundtable podcast, aptly called Aces of the Round Table, where we are a panel of asexuals from across the globe, here to discuss various issues on politics, philosophy, and current events. The topic for our first episode will be whether or not asexuals should be considered part of the LGBTQ community. And joining us today for that topic are Robin L. from Avon. Say hey, Robin.
Hey.
He's joining us from Taiwan, and joining us today from Russia is Val, also known as Inialis on Avon.
Hi there.
So they're both here to discuss the issue with us, and I'll start us off saying my bit. Personally, I don't think that asexuals should be considered part of the LGBTQ community, that we should fit under the umbrella term. I think that there are not very many similarities to warrant an obvious or necessary association or alliance like that. And personally, I don't like the idea of sort of being defaulted into movements and social dynamics that could be irrelevant to me or against my interests in some ways in terms of what they stand for fundamentally or how they're executed. And I don't like the idea that I could be sort of labeled as disloyal or a traitor if I don't follow the will of a community or the mainstream will of the community to a T. So that's just the gist of how I feel. We can go into specifics more, but for now, first, Robin, let's hear how you feel about the association with asexuals and LGBT.
Well, I do think that asexuality should be part of the LGBT label because for me, LGBTQ basically means not heterosexual or not cisgender, which is basically not the mainstream sexualities. There is some debate about whether asexuality should be considered under the queer label or it should have its own letter in the acronym, but I believe that both of these combinations do put asexuality under the label. There are definitely similarities between asexuality and, say, homosexuality or bisexuality in that we do get discriminated by the mainstream. And I do think we have lots to gain by helping each other.
Okay, Val, how about we hear from you now? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so first of all, I'm somewhere in the middle between you two. I do agree with Joe that as asexual people don't really compared to all other LGBTQ folks. But like Robin, I do feel that we need to belong to a group, and that LGBTQ does mean not heterosexual people. There is a term LGBTQA+, into which we include, but that's just too many letters. And Q somewhat is for us because queer is something that doesn't belong to the first 4 letters. Asexuals at the same time don't really belong, as LGBTQ folks say, don't belong into the group because we don't really have problems as much as they do. That is up for discussion. Do we or do we not have problems? So it's nice to belong to a group and have our rights defended, but at the same time we are different, and I feel that's what I think about this.
Okay. All right. So that's interesting. You said that it's important that asexuals belong to a group. We have at least some kind of a group into which we can fall. And I sort of agree with that myself. But for me, where I guess I would diverge is, I think that we should essentially be our own group. That because I mean we're asexual, so we have that in common. If we're gonna make a group, but as far as aligning ourselves with people who aren't asexuals, as far as I see it, take homosexuals for example. I feel like as far as how they differ from us in terms of what our sexual preferences are, we're equally different from homosexuals as we are from heterosexuals. So it seems in that sense counterintuitive to me to pick one over the other somewhat arbitrarily, because I feel like there's just that similar lack of commonality, and and for that reason, and then of course there are of course asexuals who do end up dating or entering romantic relationships, and often they end up with the same sex, not the same sex, the opposite sex rather, the opposite sex. So in that way, they're even more similar to straight people, I guess, in just functionality or practicality than they are to homosexuals. And that makes the sort of automatic default association with queer seem even more forced, I guess, in that sense. Either one of you, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are romantic orientations that are like homoromantic or biromantic, and these probably do fall under the LGBTQ label, would you say?
Okay, Val?
Again, I agree with Joe a lot. But if we say create a group that is completely separate from LGBTQ, say we have heterosexual people, LGBTQ folks, and then asexual people, don't you think that about half of the population of the planet, I wouldn't know the correct numbers, but most people would be like, who are these people? What even is this? I'm afraid that asexuality is not at all common. I mean, not common. People don't know about us for the most part. At least that's what I experienced in my life. And being with LGBTQ kind of helps us show that we are different, and it gives us visibility because some LGBTQ people, they do deal with this and they do show us as part of them. Other than that, if it weren't that way, we wouldn't get anything.
Right.
But at the same time, Joe, you're saying that we could, as asexual people, we could be in heteroromantic, in this case, it's still different, I feel. It's still different from a normal, quote-unquote, relationship, cis relationship. I don't know how to call it. Maybe that. Because we still need to talk about it to our partner, because all like gay people, for now they are different from what we feel.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask you both to pause for a moment. Marble has arrived. I'm gonna try and get her into the phone call. Okay?
Hi.
Yeah.
I can hear you now.
Well, welcome, Marble.
Hello, Marvel.
Hi.
Hi there.
All right, so Marble, why don't you go ahead and state where you're from and what your feelings are briefly on whether or not asexual should be included in LGBTQ, and then we'll get you caught up.
Oh, hi. So should I say, I'm from Colorado. I think that, oh, well, my issues on this, there are some asexuals who do not want to be a part of community for like understandable reasons, like maybe if there's a lot of stigma in the area, they don't want to be associated with the community, which I can understand. But also, I feel like there are a lot of similarities, and I actually am involved in a group in my school that works with LGBT, and the way they have like asexual awareness day and all this stuff, and the way that it was integrated was very positive there, so I think there can be positives as well.
Okay, so uh, moving forward, I'll bring up another point. That yes, that's fine, Marble. But I'll bring up another point. Maybe not. This is perhaps not so much more controversial, but maybe you're all probably less likely to disagree with this. Uh, Part of what fuels or informs my hesitance to associate asexuals with the LGBTQ label umbrella term as it is not only just the feeling that why should asexuals be defaulted into it, without really asking or anything, but also I sometimes wonder if just the base four letters of the acronym LGBT, if even that is sometimes a worthwhile or valuable or fair alliance or association of sorts. So, and I'll give an example. So many people criticize Caitlyn Jenner for being a Republican and not standing by gay rights as a transgender person. And I've seen many homosexuals or other members of the LGBT community speaking in criticism of Caitlyn Jenner for being more or less a traitor to the cause. But then, whatever obligated Caitlyn Jenner in the first place to be a champion of gay rights or what they might perceive as gay rights? Right? They're a transgender person. They're not a homosexual. Why did that happen? And so, for me, that kind of goes another way. Is in my view, and some of you already know this. For example, I myself don't like the idea of gender identity. So, identifying as what you are at birth, or identifying as the opposite of what you are at birth. I don't like to do that. And I don't want to get into far into that because that's not the topic. That's a whole other topic. But basically, it just sort of comes down to the fact that I don't like to assign values to terms like male and female. I feel like to support my own egalitarian impulses, I need to use the terms male and female as neutrally as possible. Right? And I feel like when you try and make them in identities, that kind of gets in the way of that. Right? Now, this, of course, is going to run counter to the interests of people in the transgender community, just as Caitlyn Jenner's own choices and actions as an individual will run counter to the interests of the homosexual community. So, at what point is even LGBT a viable or a fair starting point? Never mind the other letters that you could add to the alphabet soup, as it's sometimes called. Val, why don't you speak to that first?
First of all, I have to say that personally, as an asexual, I often feel uncomfortable when interacting, I would say, with other like homosexual people who are sexual, be they heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual. I feel uncomfortable all the same. Uh, so it's easier for me to just go to our asexual haven, I would say, and stay there and never interact with those people again. So yes, we are a completely separate group, in my opinion. But at the same time, I have this problem here that I do belong to LGBT, even if I am not from the asexual point of view, because I am in the transgender umbrella. So that's an issue for me. Do I belong there or do I belong here? For myself, I answer that it's more comfortable for me to stay in the asexual part and never get out of it, because asexual people still understand me and take me for what I am, even as trans. But transsexual people say wouldn't accept me as an asexual. They wouldn't understand, because sex for them is like what they talk about most of the time, I would say. So not most of the time, of course, I'm joking, but asexuality is over this way, and this is my group and it's better for me. So in this, I agree with Joe. I wouldn't go so far as to talk about genders and things like that, but about aces.
Okay, so you think that so you sort of feel like you have to pick one side or the other, I guess. You said
Yeah,
are you with
yeah,
the
and
aces?
I do pick asexual side here.
Okay.
I do feel that.
So for me that's not exactly how I look at it. I sort of see that, you if you fit into both, you can be both. But so for me the whole thing about not being LGBTQ is that I don't see aces as really necessarily even being part of that. So I don't know that we would be both aces and LGBTQ in that sense. So if it's someone like me. Now, what you for example, you're asexual and you're transgender. Maybe you could say that yeah, you're in both. But as far as just if only the only thing we knew about you is that you're asexual, we didn't know anything else. I wouldn't put you with LGBT based on that. Robin, do you want to speak to the more on this sort of this tangent about whether or not LGBT as a acronym itself, as a base acronym, is a worthwhile or a fair association?
Well, there is one problem that the acronym, it homosexuality appears 2 times, L and G, and all of the genders are lumped together into one letter, which is T. And not not everyone who is not cisgender identifies as transsexual or transgender, which is a problem with the acronym. So the acronym itself may be somewhat problematic, but the underlying idea of the acronym, which is basically not, as I said earlier, it basically represents not heterosexual or not cisgender, then I think the baseline ideology is fine. It's just that the label is kind of unfortunately named.
Okay, Marble, do you have any thoughts on this current section of discussion?
Oh well, I think that there, you're right. It's kind of like the different letters don't necessarily have very much to do with each other in the first place, but that just goes to show maybe liking they wouldn't really change that as much.
Okay. Oh, you got more?
It just, but I, well, like one of the main things that you don't have as an asexual is like there's not as much as it. So that's what links all of the other letters together. So it's sort of like just this loose category of different things, but they all have a gender taboo, so I can understand the perspective of why they should be together.
Okay, so you're saying
I think that's good.
the main four LGBT.
If I may,
Oh
sorry, Joe,
no.
if I may add one more thing.
Yes. Go ahead.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead, Val.
I like how Robin described how homosexual people get letters, and then like genders get one letter, and then let's not forget that we go into the Q category, so that Q letter in the end, it just okay, and everybody else who doesn't fit in the previous four letters, you go there. We don't really know what to do with you, but at the same time, it's really too many letters, and people ridicule LGBT for it, and it's not what we need, or they need if we do or do not. So that's an issue on its own.
Well, there has been alternate names for the LGBT community. There has been GSM, gender and sexual minority, and GSD, gender and sexual diversity, and basically the queer label itself could be used to represent the entire LGBT community. And I'm just wondering, do you agree with these labels, and would you consider asexuality to be part of these labels?
Well, there's also MOGI, which is marginalized orientations, genders, and intersex, which I think would.
Personally, ideally, I don't like the word label in the first place. And for me, ideally, I would like to live without any, I would just be an individual rather than be a part of a minority, because that does sound very diminishing to me.
Yeah.
We are not a minority anymore, that's for sure.
It does feel
Not a
like
minority?
as you keep adding
Asexuals are.
Yeah, I was gonna say it does seem that as you keep adding letters to the LGBTQ alphabet soup, as it's called, that you really start not to have a minority coalition anymore. I mean, it seems like as you keep adding letters, you're just getting more and more of the population into it, and
Exactly.
At what point do you call this a majority? At what point are straight cisgender people now technically a minority, if only at 49%, right? That's what starts to seem increasingly strange to me. I mean, I don't know the numbers on that as far as what the biggest version of the LGBTQ acronym is and how much of the population in certain countries around the world it ends up being. But it does seem like it's pushing the notion of whether you're really a minority anymore. But anyway, so that said, I want to bring up something that so far this conversation has been somewhat politically neutral, but this is important because these conversations, these ideas, do have impacts on actual political movements. So to get into some of the politics of this, one thing again that deters me from wanting to associate asexuals by default with the LGBTQ community is the trend of left-wing identity politics that's very prevalent in the LGBTQ community. I mean, the LGBTQ community is a specifically left-wing political movement. And this is why, as I said earlier, Caitlyn Jenner was sort of branded as a traitor by many people within that community for being a Republican, for supporting Republicans, for supporting Republicans who are against same-sex marriage, for example. And I myself have not been a big fan of identity politics. I don't think it's useful for dialogue. I kind of think it in the push for justice that has come from left-wing identity politics, it inadvertently set the stage for Donald Trump to become president. I don't want to continue that tradition anymore of politics being focused on identity groups. I think politics should be advocated and discussed on the basis of individuals who can come together and rally together, but at the end of the day, they're individuals. What they are, as far as what category they fit into, isn't really what matters. It's the individuals and their ideas, right? The facts and the logic and the ethics behind what they say. So again, that was a bit long. So let's just start hearing from you guys in response to that. Robin, why don't we start with you again?
Well, I also think that identity politics is a big problem, but I do not think that identity, these problematic identity politics necessarily extends to the entire LGBTQ community. I would say that it is just a small part of the LGBT community who does this. But yeah, that's just my impression of it.
Okay, Val.
I feel that you're saying that left. I'm not really good with politics, so left-wing people are more pro LGBTQ and right people are not, or at least they're stigmatized with that, right? Right?
Yes.
I feel that altogether we should just get out of politics. Problem is right now that stigmatizing the right wing, we are stigmatizing it with the fact that they just do not accept people existing, or that some people think that this is just a whim. And the problem is that we are born with it. And as soon as everybody realizes that we are born with it, we'll just get out of politics and everybody will be able to be right or left wing and be homosexual or straight at the same time.
Okay.
We just need to stay in the politics for now, push through, and then get out.
All right, Marble.
Yes, I agree with this.
Look, let's just hear from Marble for a moment.
Well, yeah, if you really want to connect with people and work together, it has to be about like who you are instead of just like what you are on a surface level. But at the same time, you have this as these identities, at least most of them, as being part of politics because they're currently being attacked as a group. So we want to push that forward. It's just the only risk is when you start getting to the point where people just see only one aspect of their identity as who they are and develop an us versus them mentality.
Which you might agree is sort of the same fallacy that conservatives kind of do to sort of oppress these LGBT groups.
I mean, it's not necessarily a left versus right thing. There are definitely conservatives who will take on the group identity over individual identities, and even like left and right are group identities within themselves. Like people are like, oh, I'm a leftist, so I'm just with these leftists, and I can't stand anybody who's on the right, or vice versa. It's just, if you really want to connect with people, you have to see them as people and not just like basically.
Okay. Yeah, I agree, and to a point, I do understand that there's a need to have some political activism for the LGBTQ community, just because. And for example, as long as transgender people are being assaulted in bathrooms at the rates that they are, that's going to be a problem. But I do worry sometimes that the focus on identity politics often causes people to think in very narrow ways, like you said, with an us-them mentality. And sometimes there are third ways to doing things, or alternative things, or things that might seem adversarial at first that aren't, that people end up overlooking. So here's an example of, I feel like, something that's kind of overlooked on the topic of bathrooms. And that was a big issue in my state of North Carolina starting last year when they passed that bill to ban transgender people from using the bathroom of their preferred gender. for me, I feel like one thing that was really missed is like, well, let's just let transgender people use the bathroom that they want. It's like, okay, but then how do you measure that? Right? There's so much vagueness about who's transgender or not. I see transgender people on Avon even saying, well, I'm trans, but this person isn't trans. It feels like it's a rough standard. And then of course it invites the question
I think
of,
people can just.
well, if I just finish my thought, it invites the question of why even segregate restrooms? Like, what are we saying when we have male specific and female specific restrooms? Right? What's the implication? Is it to imply that if a man is in the restroom with a woman, he's going to assault her? I feel like that's not a notion that's being challenged. They're going to challenge the idea that, oh, you can't tell transgender people not to use this restroom, but they're not going to challenge the other implications with the way restrooms are segregated. All right, so that's something that comes to mind, for example. And so, if did you have something to say, Marble?
Oh yeah. Well, I think that people can just decide for themselves which bathrooms they need to use. We don't really need to like be involved in that. But yeah, I agree that it's. I'm not sure to be separate in the first place. I've heard of some cases where like uh, people would um, someone on even was saying they would be uncomfortable going into the men's bathroom because of previous um, well like sexual assaults or something or sexual harassment experiences, and they didn't want to be in a situation where they would I be there. But I just yeah, I think they should be challenging that, but it's just not at that point in politics right now, or left or right. I think feel.
Okay, did Val or Robin, either of you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I'd like to add a thing. Um, it's really, I would say it's an odd situation we have here. We are trying to show the world, or LGBT is trying to show the world that there are different people, and not all those people are even female or male, because there are some non-binary people out there too. But our bathrooms are still trying to stay binary. And bathroom is a place where you have a toilet. And it looks exactly the same in the male bathroom and the female bathroom, except for one piece that is in the male bathroom, but okay. It's exactly the same, and the purpose is exactly the same, and you use it pretty much the same way. But people are forcing... How do you divide female and male in using the bathroom? That's my question.
Yes.
Where does
Yes.
male using the bathroom end and female using the bathroom start?
That's the thing that I
the
wonder.
idea. So
Yeah.
I'd say, I'll just finish my sentence, okay? I say we have one with toilets, one with the things that male people use, which is more comfortable for some people, well, not me, but okay. And then there is a room for child care, right? Sometimes on the side. Let's just have those three and just use what you need. It's basic biological needs. Come on. You need to run in there, do your thing, and run out. Done.
Yes. Okay, and I agree. So
Too big of a deal,
yeah.
I feel.
So one thing that I guess concerns me about not challenging the notion of just having binary bathrooms, you said, like why make society accommodate non-binary people, but then bathrooms have to be binary, for example, right? So for me, it's as simple as say I'm out somewhere and I need to use the restroom, and for some reason the men's room is locked, right? And I really have to go, and I don't know where any other restroom is, and so I said, oh, I'll just use the women's restroom. What could happen, right? So if we don't challenge the notion of binary bathrooms, it would be a very weird, I feel, an unfair legal standard that I could go into a women's room just because I need to use the bathroom and then come out, and in that sense, I've committed a criminal act. But somebody who has, for example, the same body as me, but they identify as the opposite. That's perfectly acceptable. And all they had to do, especially if we're just going to let people make that determination themselves, they just had to declare it. And I decided not to declare it. And that's the difference between a criminal act and not. With the same action done, I feel like that's some of the problem here, and it's issues like this that make me think, well, if these are the things that these are the distinctions that the LGBTQ community is missing, why would I want to be associated with this community, generally speaking?
Well, is it? I'm not really sure how the law works on this. Would you? I just don't think it should be a criminal act, no matter what. Just you can like maybe have the labels on the rooms, but just don't have any laws about who can do what. I think people can be left alone unless they actually do something else illegal, which of course would be bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that as a criminal act.
So, do you think maybe a binary system for restrooms isn't bad, but maybe it shouldn't be on a male-female basis? Because, like Val said, what is the difference between male and female? Excretion, I guess, to put it that way.
I don't think it should. I don't think it should be illegal for anyone to go into any restroom. I don't know.
Okay, so might you say that let's say it'd just be better to have a sign on the bathroom door that says there are urinals in here, and a sign that says there are not urinals in here, and that would be just a better way to go about it. And that way, I guess, on average, the men would go where the urinals are because, for them, it's just stand up, do your stuff, and then keep moving. But then there's no technicality saying, oh, you have to be a man in here. So therefore, there's no grounds for getting somebody in trouble for using the bathroom.
Yeah, I just don't think there should be a law about that. If you go and hurt somebody in there, that's obviously against the law. But you don't need a law against going into any bathroom itself.
Okay, Val, Robin, you got anything on that?
Well, I mostly disagree, so.
Okay. All right, same with you, Val. You mostly disagree.
I don't have much to add.
Why are we even having this problem if everybody agrees?
Well, not everyone in this. Not everyone.
Not everyone.
Yeah, people who disagree are not in this discussion right now. Unfortunately, it'd be nice to have them here, but it's difficult to find. So there's just one more.
It's nice because
Yeah.
I've never thought about this before, but I agree with it.
I mean, what Joe said, I actually do these things. I normally go to a female bathroom just because I'm used to it, just that. But sometimes it doesn't work, and it happens very often because it just happens that females use bathrooms more on average. So sometimes I do. I look at both bathrooms and I say, screw that. I just need to do this quickly. So I go into the male one. And, well, people look at me funny a little bit, but they just go around doing their own business because everybody understands why I'm doing this. I mean, the sign is right there on the door, like, this is broken or something.
Yeah, and for me,
maybe it's connected to the fact. Sorry, maybe that's connected to the fact that Russia doesn't even comprehend such problems as transgender people in bathrooms because we are way behind on all this.
It could be,
but it's still nice to have that.
I kind of see what you're saying, though. So when I was, and this probably is true for many people, but when I was a very little boy, that we're talking toddler age, okay, 3 to 5, when I would be in public with my mother, and we'd be using the restrooms, we might be, at the grocery store or something, or the mall, and she's buying some things. I needed to use the restroom. She would take me into the women's room with her to go, right? And so for actually much of my early life, I never used a male public restroom. I always went to the women's room. It was a while before I was actually allowed to go in the men's room by myself, right? But here I am, a person of the opposite sex still in the women's room, and it was no difference to me. And I mean, people might say, well, there's no danger that's going to come from a child like an adult with malicious intentions. Yeah, I guess, but fundamentally, it can happen, and the experience for me is the same. And I sort of feel like just people who would do bad things. I don't know that the bathroom is necessarily the place that like you're gonna. That is the barrier where you'll protect people. I really don't think that it's going to matter. So like when the bill was passed here in North Carolina to keep transgender people out of restrooms and keep them in the restrooms for their natural born sex. Um, one of the big arguments from the Republicans was that, well, it's not so much like even they tried to dress it up saying, well, we're not doing this against transgender people, but people who pretend to be transgender who want to go into a restroom so they can take advantage of women, that's what we're trying to stop. And I just thought, if sexual assault's already illegal, if they're willing to go that far, what difference does the sign on the door make? I mean that's like uh, tying a little thread to stop a charging bull, putting a thread across the alleyway or something. It just doesn't seem relevant to me.
Yeah.
And I still feel like that's the thing here, but as long as we do have, but the thing is, I still feel like many people in the left wing, in the LGBTQ community, still agree that will happen if an actual cisgender male, for example, were in the women's room. And that's why they don't challenge the idea of male-female restrooms. When it's really restrooms at our homes are not male or female, so what does it matter, right?
Well, I think maybe they just want to pick their battles, and it's not personally relevant to a lot of them that they exist, but it's personally relevant if they're being forced in the wrong one.
Okay. Well, anyway, so the discussion is getting to its close. We're getting about to our time limit here. So, are there any just closing remarks that you'd all like to make? Why don't we start with you, Robin? And this is about the whole conversation, not just what we were just discussing.
Well, I I do see the arguments for and against LG and asexuals being under the LGBT label, but ultimately I will still stand by my original argument. Though I do accept that, yeah, people can choose for themselves whether they wish to be part of the LGBT label based on their identity as an asexual.
Okay. Val, how about you?
Um, I'd like to say that the last example that we used about bathrooms, we talked so much about it. It's a good example to show that people pay a lot of attention to transgender people. For example, yeah, there's like a lot of problems connected to sexual people, and we are completely not connected to that. Because the sexual topic is this very hot topic where people are very nervous about it. Yeah, because it's sex. Come on, makes people nervous. And we are not connected to it, so we don't have as much visibility as the LGBT folks. That makes us very different, right? So that's my point.
Okay, and Marble, why don't we get to you?
Oh, something I forgot to say when we were discussing that. I've noticed that the people who seem to want asexuals to be part of the LGBT community, like, don't seem to identify as straight before they realized they were asexual, whereas the ones that don't want it often did think they were straight at first. So I think there's some reasons people might have connections to that community beforehand, or they might like be biromantic or homoromantic or something of that. So I don't think it's wrong to respect people's decision either way, because I trust that people have some reasoning behind their decision to identify as part or not part of it.
Okay, and I guess I'll just state my own closing words here. That on this topic, I feel still, of course, that asexuals should be considered a separate category from LGBTQ, except of course in the case that they themselves fall into LGBTQ by other means. So Val's example being transgender and all, so they're both asexual and transgender. Um, that would be a case where I think you could be both. But for someone like me, and as far as I know, with Robin and Marble, I would think we would just be asexual without being LGBTQ. Uh, so there's that, and of course, I feel that there's a whole can of worms that just comes with being LGBTQ because it's politically charged, and in my interest as an asexual, there's not as much need to have this political fight or to pursue every political cause that's pushed by the LGBTQ community to a T. So that all said, I'd like to thank you all for sitting down with me to do this. It was very nice to have all of you here and make this thing happen, and hopefully it can go a little more smoothly in the future. But you all did very well just by being here, so thank you.
Thank you for letting us back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry I was late. Thought that it was 2 hours later because I'm on different time stuff. So
Okay. Well,
got
yeah.
about that.
Things like this happen. Anyway, so that concludes our first episode, and we hope all of you enjoyed it. Alright, hello again, guys. Just one more thing before you go. As I said in the announcements video, I want this to be a weekly or bi-weekly thing. And I would like to record another session this weekend. And the topic that I have in mind would be how Donald Trump managed to win the presidency. It should be an interesting conversation, I think. And again, we want to push for an ideologically diverse panel. So, the things we need is one, a conservative person to speak on the panel. Those are a little harder to find. Of course, a liberal-minded person we want as well. Shouldn't be as hard to find. And maybe a more moderate or libertarian-minded person. And the only requirements we really have is that you're an asexual person, because that's the point of the series, and that you're not a minor, because we don't want to get into trouble having kids on the show. Yeah, but as long as you meet those two things, you don't even have to be a member on Avon, per se. We just like that you be an asexual, ready to discuss things, in a civil manner. All right. So, with that, we look forward to your participation. Thanks.